Hello! In this video we're going to look at polarizing filters, think about what they are, but also when we'd use them and also how to use them. Sometimes your pictures might look a bit washed out, they lack punch and vibrancy, and they're just not doing justice to the scene that you've got in front of you. Now, linked with that problem are you getting reflections off surfaces like water that mean you can't get to see the detail beneath. So if you're by a lake and there's a nice boulder and you want to see what's beneath the surface, sometimes the reflection prevents you from doing that. So that's a problem that maybe a polarizer is going to be able to help us with. So we'll see how polarizing filters, or polarizers as they're called for short, help us to overcome those types of problems and help us to get better looking images. Okay, so what are they? Well, first let's take a look at what polarizers are. So this one is magnetic and it makes it easy to use and fit onto the camera, as you can see. Now, full disclosure, the filters I use are from Case Filters, with who I am a pro partner. They're a very high quality product and something that you might consider if you're getting more serious about your photography. Now, if you really want to understand the physics and the science behind polarizers, then there are lots of complicated explanations online that will keep you satisfied for days. I actually want to keep these tutorials as practical as possible. So as a photographer, I'd suggest that all we really need to understand is that polarizing filters change the way that your camera sees and treats light. So a polarizer will let some types of light in whilst cutting out other types of light. So why use them? Well, as I've hinted at, science and physics isn't particularly my strongest of subjects, but what I can tell you about with some confidence are the practical uses of polarizers. So when you stick a polarizer in front of your lens, it can help to overcome those problems that we touched upon. It can reduce glare or reflections from surfaces such as water, glasses even, foliage, and even the sky. So as that glare is reduced, the natural colour saturation in a scene becomes more visible, and that can really add to your shot, making it look more contrasty and vibrant and overcoming that washed out look that you might be experiencing. So when people think about polarizers, it's often connection with blue skies and white clouds. So if you go on holiday to Greece and you've got gorgeous blue skies and these beautiful domed white buildings, a polarizer on there will really make that white punch and make the skies look more blue, if you like, a bit darker, a bit more saturated. So that's great if you're in Greece, but if, like me, you live on the western side of the United Kingdom, blue skies aren't going to be something that you're particularly worried about that often. Quite the opposite. So in terms of my own use of a polarizer, for example, when I'm at home here in the Lake District, I'm much more likely to use it when I'm in, say, a woodland setting. Now, if there's been some rain, and that has coated the foliage, the leaves, there's often a bit of a reflection coming back off there, and that means you don't really get the colour saturation, you don't get the vibrancy of the foliage. So blue skies, great if you've got them, but if you've not, a polarizer is still really useful. Also, I like to use it when I'm near water. So say I'm at a lake or a stream, there's often some detail that sits beneath the surface of the water that I want to see. So whether it's the stream bed, maybe it's a bedrock showing, or there's some boulders under the water. By using the filter, I'm able to actually see the detail in that rather than the glare from the surface of the water. So another use for them there. So the final thing I want to talk about is pressing a polarizing filter into service as a neutral density filter. So we talk about neutral density filters in another video, but here what I want you to think of is that as well as being a polarizer, they are also holding back about 2 stops of light, meaning that if you want to adjust your shutter speed, if you want to use a longer shutter speed, once you've got that polarizer on, for example, if you're taking a picture at a waterfall, you're reducing the glare with the polarizer, but you're also holding back some light. So that could get you to, say, 1/4 of a second, and that enables you to render the movement in a scene. So polarizers, as well as doing their polarizing function, can always use them as a makeshift neutral density filter as well. Okay, so the next thing I want to cover is how we actually use them. If you've been taking your images and you've found that when you've reviewed them out in the field, they're lacking that saturation, they look a bit washed out, or you're finding that a reflection off a particular surface is causing a bit of an issue, that's when we would actually use the filter. Now, unlike neutral density grad filters, which I talk about in a separate video, you don't need to have the camera on a tripod to be using a polarizing filter, unless you use a tripod in your normal workflow anyway. So using them is actually pretty straightforward. You put the filter on the lens, and then there's a part of the filter that rotates. So what we do is rotate that filter, and as you do that, you'll see the polarizing effect come and go. And all you need to do really is experiment to find the right degree of effect that suits your taste and it suits that particular scene. So pretty straightforward to use. Okay, there are a couple of things to bear in mind when using polarizers. If you are shooting skies, for example, it can be quite easy to overcut the effect and have a really dark blue sky. So if you're getting a polarizer for the first time, often what you'll tend to do is put it on its maximum effect because it has a bit of a wow factor. But when you look back and review those images, you think, do you know what, it's gone a bit too far. So rotate the filter so that you get the effect whilst you're still retaining a kind of natural look to the shot. That'd be what I recommend. Don't just set the polarizer to its maximum all the time. Sometimes you won't need that. The next thing to consider is that the polarizer is at its maximum efficiency when you are shooting your camera at a 90 degree angle to the main light source. So as a landscape photographer, that'll be predominantly the sun. Now, if you're shooting directly towards the sun or directly opposite the sun, the polarizing effect might be 0. And as you get to that 45 degree angle, the polarizing effect will graduate and be more apparent. So be aware of what direction you're shooting in. Kind of following on from this, particularly when you're using wide angle lenses, you might find that part of your image has been effectively polarized by the filter, but as you then scan across to, say, the other side of the scene, that polarizing effect has diminished, and that's to do with the angle of light that I've just discussed. So you end up with part of the sky that looks dark and part of it that looks brighter. It just looks wrong, and it's frankly a pain to sort out in post. What you want to do really is sort that issue out at the time of shooting. So that might be using a longer focal length, or you might alter the angle that you're shooting to overcome this, but not something you want to try and rectify later on. Definitely something to sort at the time of shooting. So just to conclude, polarizers can stop your images from looking washed out. They'll help to bring out that saturation and vibrancy that you can see in the scene, enabling the camera to see that as well. They're helpful for removing unwanted reflections from surfaces like water and glass, meaning that you're able to see the details beneath them. As we touched upon, they can be used as a ND filter to hold back a couple of stops of light. So there's three things. There are some other things, but as you can see just from that summary, they're a pretty versatile bit of kit. And I'd say that if you haven't got any filters yet, a polarizing filter is probably going to be the first thing that should be on your filter shopping list. I've done some separate videos that cover the other filter groups, and they also have the step-by-step instructions on how to use them. If that sounds useful, you can find them in the links below. Well, I hope that's been of some use to you, that little overview. If you've got any questions about using polarizers or thoughts, then feel free to pop them in the comments below. And consider subscribing if you'd like to keep up to date with more photography tips videos. Okay, so all that's left is for you to take your next step, which is to get out there and take pictures. Thank you for watching, and goodbye for now.